they are contacting a law office.
That the clients are actually seeking advice, asking questions.
Herzlich willkommen auf unserem YouTube-Kanal Dubai Recht klar mit Deria und Omar. Heute möchten wir in unserem neuen Video über Forderungsbeitreibung sprechen und haben dazu unsere Experten aus Dubai mit eingeladen, eine lokale Anwaltskanzlei. Zu dem Zweck werden wir jetzt in die englische Sprache wechseln. Ahmad and Darren, thank you to have you here. We are so proud to have you here. And Ahmad, maybe you can just quickly introduce yourself and your company. And then Darren, also a brief introduction, that would be
great. Thank you anyway, Omar. Thank you, Daria, for the opportunity to discuss some of the most important topics for businesses operating here in the UAE. My name is Ahmed Douta. I'm the managing lawyer at Hussein Douta and Partners. We are a firm established in 1997 with a focus on dispute resolution, litigation. We are licensed to appear in the federal courts, the 7 Emirates federal courts, including Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and Sharjah. Our main practice areas are commercial disputes and real estate disputes. We advise clients on employment matters as well, and the real estate, obviously, was one very important practice area which we are deeply involved in.
Good afternoon, my name is Darren Bradshaw. I currently head up the corporate law practice at Hussein Douta. But when I initially qualified, way back in the mid-90s, I was primarily an employment lawyer in the United Kingdom. I trained as a barrister. That's one of the strange guys who wears wigs and a gown to make him look like Batman. I then moved into the in-house sphere in the early 2000s, where I practiced initially commercial litigation and then branched out purely into construction law. But it was construction law dealing with infrastructure and buildings. That's what brought me to the UAE. I was sent here on a secondment. I then exceeded that secondment, which was only 18 months. I've been here since 2006, so it's only a slight overview. And what I then did, I moved into oil and gas, but still in the construction field. And more recently, I've come over to Hussein Douta back into private practice, where I practice, as I said, I run the corporate law department, but I also deal with employment law, construction law, maritime law, and dispute resolution, primarily arbitration, not litigation. I'm not a litigator.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Darren, for the introduction. So today we would like to discuss the topic debt collection. When we talk about debt collection, what is your advice for, let's say, foreign investors when they do business in the UAE? So what recommendations would you give them or advice?
Well, at the beginning, see, this is a sensitive topic, and unfortunately some businesses trading and operating here in the region find that as a challenging topic for them, and it affects the cash flow, it affects the operation of the company in general. But my general advice is for companies, especially the startups, they need to understand the system. They need to understand their rights exactly. Secondly, to have a proper preparation of their documents, contracts, and they need to understand these terms and conditions in their contracts, because eventually when things get a little bit challenging at the end of the relationship, everyone will end up pulling his contracts and trying to get whatever solutions he will basically reach. So this is one advice. But another general advice is do a minimum level of research on your customers.
That's a good point.
That's a very essential one. Unfortunately, there's two aspects when entering in transactions with customers. One is the commercial side, then there is the legal side. Unfortunately, the commercial side is usually more important for most of the businesses. By doing that, they risk their capital, they risk their rights with ignoring their terms and conditions in their agreement, not considering a proper protection at the very beginning. The second point is basically you need to understand what tools are available for you for the debt collection process. So, for instance, contracts are different from checks, are different from different tools, basically. So these are 2 or 3 general advice for companies and businesses and startups generally. I would say the last thing is you need to take action on the proper time and the right time. In many situations, we are approached by clients who are a bit hesitant to take a step because of the relationship aspect with their customers. I would say I wouldn't recommend to push them. However, I would recommend at least to seek advice during that particular sensitive period of time, to seek advice and to understand what rights do they have. Are they able to wait? Are they able to delay the process, or they need to act quickly? In some situations, such as checks, as you know, there is a certain expiry date. Yeah, in general, these are my suggestions for any company who's dealing with some debt collection challenges.
I think you mentioned really interesting points, because what we are facing very often with our clients is indeed that they are contacting a law office only when they have already issues, you know, when they are facing exactly this topic, that they are trying to collect the debts and it's not possible. Most companies don't think about involving a lawyer beforehand,
Even
you know,
earlier.
while you are drafting the contracts. They don't understand that this is really actually the crucial part, not the debt collection itself.
Exactly.
The prior step, drafting in a proper way the contract, is very crucial and important.
Absolutely.
What we also face is, clients, we are dealing mainly with German or German-speaking clients. The question they are asking me regularly is, I have a German contract, it's under German law, it should be also legally valid and binding in the UAE. Can you confirm that? So that's one of the major questions also they ask when it comes to contract. Yes, there might be some provisions which are similar in the UAE, and they might be also enforceable then in the UAE, even if it's drafted under German law. However, a proper review is definitely advisable due to specific regulations in the UAE, which might be different.
But you mentioned a very positive fact that the clients are actually seeking advice, asking questions, which is very healthy, I would say, behavior, because the majority of the disputes I can see is that client didn't bother to ask any question, didn't verify his legal situation at the very early stages. I think this sort of understanding needs to be changed somehow with people exploring the region here. They need to understand their rights. They need to seek advice from professionals like yourself, for example, on the validity of their contracts.
Ahmed, you mentioned, I think this is really enlightening, that the clients need to do some research about their customers. This is really very important.
The due diligence part.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What do you recommend actually as a research? Imagine our client is sitting in or is based in Germany.
Yeah.
How can they do such research, or what includes such research?
Well, Daria, you may know this research can stretch all the way from a basic KYC until a very, very complicated, deep research on the background of the client, like the banks and the financial institutions are doing. However, it's always a subject of debate when we start raising this point with customers, because, commercially speaking and in terms of practice here in the region, you will receive this answer that this is not possible, this is difficult. I think this same point applies on real estate as well. When we're talking about tenants, landlords, I have seen different types of clients and landlords specifically. Some of them are very picky with their customers and clients, and they require a very detailed background check on the customer, which is their right, I believe so, legally. However, in practice, other clients will say it's challenging, it's not accepted. But the minimum, I would say, information you would seek is the trade license of the counter company. You need to know exactly, are you dealing with X company or Y company? Because as a matter of fact, there was a case we've been dealing with a couple of weeks ago. And the client actually, we don't expect this from him to understand the differences, but we had contracts with a company and payments from a third company and a job done for a fourth company, which is a very complicated situation. But in reality, the client was actually dealing with a single customer, and he never had this in his consideration. But if he sought some advice at the beginning, and obviously it was a construction deal, basically, which is obviously a very sensitive deal. Yeah. That's one example of due diligence. So if there was a minimum level of due diligence, he will be able to identify who was his customer. Was the payments done by this relevant customer, or is it done by a second party? Can he accept a payment to be coming from a second party? That's let's say the step one, the basics of a due diligence, which even though we feel it's very minimal, but in reality, many businesses are actually not doing that.
The funny part, we have also so many clients who are dealing with customers, making payments back and forth. And when we are asking them, can you provide me with the license of the company? They are saying, I don't
It's
have
not
the
available.
license, not a MOA, nothing. Actually, basically, they don't have any proof that this company exists.
The company, and even the deal exists. In some cases, there is no written agreement. This takes us back to the agreements. Obviously, in the UAE laws, it's not restricted to a written classic form of an agreement. You can prove it by various ways. However, documentation is very crucial to prove your case.
In case that the client needs to go to the UAE courts because they really have debts outstanding or they are not able to collect these payments from a customer, how difficult is this procedure, Ahmed, in front of the courts
It's
here?
as difficult as the client documents.
Okay. Yeah. So we come back to the documents again.
If I would put it in this way. So in some certain cases, it's very straightforward, especially, for example, when we are talking about checks. If we're talking about checks specifically, after the new amendments, which was happening recently in the UAE laws, there is a very straightforward application for checks, which is called enforcement of checks. If the checks are available, the documentation are available, and everything is in order, it's a very straightforward process. However, the actual collection depends on the ability of the counterparty to do these payments, in fact. And this is also part of the debt collection topic in general. So because when you're looking at a debt collection situation, you need to go back to the research and the due diligence part of it. Is this customer capable of paying you back? Are you giving him any kind of credit, which is a different situation? If there is any credit given to this client, then you need to be able to identify if he's capable of paying you back or not.
Coming back to the debt collection, do you see any increase of debt collection in the market compared to maybe 5, 6, 7 or 10 years back?
I won't say there is a trend. This was always a challenging topic. And it's, as I said previously, it's due to lack of knowledge, some missing necessary steps to be taken by the clients at the very beginning, which wasn't there. And obviously, we are in a very diverse market with different nationalities, different type of companies, different sizes of companies. And one of the reasons I personally feel is when we're looking at startups and SMEs, there is a lack of ability to control the cash flow. It might not be intentional, but because of this particular issue, it creates problems with the collection eventually.
The success of recovering, let's say, money depends also on the timing, I guess.
That's another factor. It's a crucial factor, exactly.
Very good. So we're coming to the next point. So what do you think? When is the right time? When should companies start, let's say, enforcing their rights, going into debt collection and not waiting too long, risking maybe insolvency or these kind of topics?
Okay. There's two answers here. First of all, engaging your legal counsel is also important, sometimes during the communication with the counterparty. And I'll give you another example that's relevant to the real estate sector specifically. In the real estate, you have in the secondary market specifically, when you have the Form F transaction and a deadline basically to finish a deal, a real estate deal. Any communication between parties are very important. It will reflect on his situation in the court later on. One of the cases I have seen recently, the client, before consulting an advisor, he was communicating with the counterparty, giving him some certain excuses, which he was under the impression that those are valid excuses for him to delay the deal. However, what we identified later on, that this type of communication actually was the reason that the seller was able to win a case against the buyer, because he proved clearly that the default was coming from the buyer, because the buyer never consulted his lawyers before creating these communications. So the communication part is essential, and sometimes it's also more important in some arbitration cases, as you know. So the communication is very, very crucial. And then we talk about the action, and there is different scenarios here. In some situations, you have misunderstanding. You have some sort of arguments between the customer and the client, and some issues about the quality sometimes, about the service, about the goods, etc. In that scenario, I wouldn't say you should rush into the legal process, because probably communication, some certain legal notices with the counterparty could solve this issue, because it's a matter of misunderstanding. But the other sensitive scenario is that when you don't have any communication from the counterparty, he's not responding to you, he's simply refusing to pay, as you can imagine. This is the crucial example which you need to act quickly, and sometimes there is different parties who might be involved in this debt collection let's say process against this particular company, which you want to be in front of them. This is a simple way to explain it, basically.
Are there any specific industries, let's say, where debt collection is more likely or less likely? How do you see that? You mentioned before construction, which is a very complex topic. We know.
Yes, yeah.
So what?
Yeah.
So
it's not limited to any specific industry, but yes, some industries are affected more than the others, as you said here. Construction, obviously, because of the reason of the long-term contracts, constructions and real estate may be affected more. However, this particular challenge is not limited to any specific industry. This is what we have seen.
I think one of the also most important questions is, what should customers do or clients do if the let's say debtor, he is refusing to pay? So what action should they initiate?
We need also to specify, are we talking about a bounce check situation here?
Let's discuss first the contractual side.
The contractual side, I will come back to the previous answer. It also depends on the scenario. Is it a miscommunication? Is it an argument about the service or the product or not? Which every example has a different solution. I will repeat it again, because in the misunderstanding situations, I believe a proper communication, legal communication is very helpful in these situations. It may solve the problem as long as it's not an inability of payment from the other party. It's not a cash flow issue.
Yeah.
It's not an intentional issue of stopping the payment. If that's not the case, then I believe initiating a certain communication will be really helpful. However, in the other three situations which I explained just now, quick action is very, very necessary for you to. Obviously, if you have done your previous homework well by due diligence and having some certain level of securities, your action will really be helpful later.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ahmad. I think we have given very interesting and insightful aspects when it comes to debt collection in the UAE. So thank you very much for joining us in this podcast. Wir sind damit auch wieder am Ende dieses Videos. Wenn euch das Video gefallen hat, dann gebt uns einen Daumen nach oben, liked das Video, kommentiert gerne, und wenn ihr Interesse an einer Firmengründung habt, dann meldet euch bei uns.